In today's tutorial, I want to talk about working with the responses that we get back from these LLM calls and how we can turn that into something useful. Now, I've talked about this in previous videos, but all these LLMs that we're talking to, like OpenAI's GPT-4, we can communicate with using a REST API call. So we don't need a ton of features on top of that. But once we start building real world applications that integrate with these LLMs, you're going to start to notice some patterns come up and some problems that we're going to have to solve for. One of those problems is just this. Hey, we get a response from the LLM. How do we turn it into something useful, something that we can work with? The response from a generative LLM is simply a java.util.string. Even if you ask for JSON, that's a JSON string. So how can we turn this into something useful? Well, Spring AI provides us a tool out of the box. This is an interface called the Output Parser. And there are three implementations of this: the bean, the map, and the list. So in today's tutorial, what we're going to do is create a simple program and talk about working with each of those output parsers and how they work. So with that, I'm going to head over to start.spring.io. I'm going to create a new application. I'm going to say this is Maven. We're using the latest version of Spring Boot. I'm going to say dev.dan-vega. We'll call this the output parser. And then I'll just put this in a simple package here. I'm going to use Java 21, and the only dependencies that I need for this are web, and I probably want to bring in Spring AIs. Now, you can use whatever LLM you're working with. In this particular case, I'm going to use OpenAI. This will work with any of those LLM providers there. Now, I will say we are working on just the output parser portion of this, but I will leave a link in the description below to the GitHub repository that contains all of the different samples and demos that we have been working on. I put these all in one single repo, but for this case, we're just going to work with a single project here and work through those different demos. So with that, you can go ahead and hit the generate button here. This will download a zip file you can open up in whatever text editor IDE you're most productive in. I'm going to open it up in IntelliJ Ultimate Edition. And with that, let's write some code. All right, so I have my application open. I'm going to go into application.properties. If you've missed this, go ahead and leave a link in the description to my Getting Started with Spring AI. One of the first things you have to do is set up your OpenAI API key. I have mine in using an environment variable, so I don't have it just in plain text here. So I can go ahead and check this into Git without anybody getting my credentials. So this is using an environment variable. So I have my API key. I'm also kind of configuring my model to say I'm using GPT-4. Again, this is stuff we covered in the Spring AI introduction video. So I have that set up. That will get me going part of the way. So let's do this. Let's go ahead and create a new Java class. I'm going to call this the songs controller. And the songs controller is going to be a REST controller. Again, this is coming from the introduction video. The first thing that we need is a chat client. So I'm going to say private final chat client. And it's almost like it hears me because it just kind of suggested that. Isn't that crazy? Okay, so now we have a chat client. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to paste in this first method because we're going to use this to kind of see what it would do without an output parser. So I have this get songs by artist. We can pass in an artist. The default is T Swift, of course. So I have this message saying, please give me a list of the top 10 songs for the artist. If you don't know, just say you don't know. So this is not using an output parser. We're just saying, hey, here's our prompt template. We're going to pass in the artist. Here's our prompt. Go ahead and use that to pass to the chat client call method. So we're passing a prompt in there. And ultimately what we get is from the content is a string. So we're just returning a string. So let's see if we go ahead and run this application. Again, we're at /songs. So what I'm going to do is open up a terminal here, make this a little bigger. And actually, let me make all of this a little bigger for you. So let's zoom in a little bit. Let's say there. And if I'm there, let's go ahead and run an HTTP command. So this is using HTTP IE, a little bit like curl, but for us humans who don't read machine code. So we're going to go to HTTP:/80 localhost 8080/songs, and then we're going to use that default artist, which is Taylor Swift, and we should get a list of 10 songs. Now, we're going to get this in a string format. This is not in any format that we can really use. This is just a string with some numbers indicating the top 10 songs. But we got our response. So this is good. This is what I meant by, hey, we can just talk to an LLM using a REST API call. This is very natural for us, right? But now I start working with this and I go, okay, well, this is nice, but I actually need something a little bit more specific. And in this case, I actually want a list of strings. I don't want just a big string that comes back, right? Let's see how we can go ahead and update this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this. I'm going to paste this in here, and I'll go ahead and comment this one out so you can save this in the code that you get. And here we have our message, and here we have our prompt template. So before our prompt template, what I want to do is I want to say, I want to take a look at the output parsers. So if we look at output parser, if we jump into there, again, I mentioned this at the beginning, this is a interface. And if we look at the implementations of this, there are really three that we care about right now: the bean, the list, and the map. And in this case, I want to use the list output parser. And so what the format does is you can say, hey, I'm going to use this list output parser. And when you call get format, it returns a string. So it says, hey, your response should be a list of comma separated values. Example, foo, bar, baz, right? And this is how we're kind of helping the LLM understand what we want to get back. So let's do this. Let's say I want to get a new list output parser. Now the list output parser, if you look at this, takes a default conversion service. So I'm not going to get into that right now. I'm just going to go ahead and say new default conversion service. And this should be exactly what I need. I'm going to call this the output parser. Oops, let's say output parser. Now that I have the output parser, I can do something. So in this string up here, I can say, here is the, whoops. Here is the format that I'd like it in, right? So please give me a list of top 10 songs for artists. If you don't know, just say I don't know. Here is the format. So now when I pass in this map, I'm saying artist, artist, and I'm also going to replace the format, format. And then the format that we're going to get is from the output parser. We'll call that get format, right? So now that we have that, we can just call the prompt template.create. Variable prompt template might not have been initialized. Oops. So what I want here is, okay, I think I just have a problem there. And now that should work. So now we have our prompt template. We call create. We pass this in. Now the response that we're going to get content, is actually going to be a list of string, right? Because that's what we asked for back. So we just got to kind of change the response that we're getting here. So we have a response. What we're going to do is we're going to ask the output parser. That looks pretty good. We're going to ask the output parser to parse that. So here's the response from the get content, but we're just saying, hey, we have an output parser now. Go ahead and parse that. So that's what handles the parsing of the response. So it looks like we have a little typo here. Okay, so it is running again. So now let's go back and ask our same endpoint to give us a list of songs. And there we go. Now we have this nice list that we can work with. We have a list of strings. This is something that we can work with. So now if you wanted more complicated, a more complicated object to come back, like you said, hey, give me like the top 10 songs on the Billboard chart in 2001. Give me the artist and the song name. Now that might be something we want to turn into like an actual object or a map, right? So just understanding what you're trying to get back from the LLM will kind of dictate which one of these output parsers we're going to use. All right, the next output parser I want to take a look at is the map output parser. So to do so, I'm going to go ahead and create a new class called the book controller class. This is going to be a REST controller, and we're going to start again, as we did before. We are going to need a check client. So let's say private final check client, and get this through, and get this through constructor injection. And now we can begin to work on our first method here. So I'm going to create a get mapping. This is going to be to /author, and this is going to be dynamic, right? And I think I need, do I need a request mapping? Yeah, let's go ahead and add a request mapping to the class /books. And this method, again, is going to be to /books/author, and then whatever author you would like to get books for. And so we're going to go ahead and say that this is, I'm going to turn Copilot off. So if you're not aware, I'm using GitHub Copilot. It is really great. But for demos, probably a little bit too much distraction. So let me kind of disable this for now. So public, what do we want to get back from this? In this case, I want to get a map back. We're going to get a map back of a string and an object. And we're going to call this by author. I don't know why I have this by topic. By author. And we'll call this by author. And this is going to take in the path variable. So path variable for the author. And what do we want to do here? So I'm going to start with the prompt message. So you don't have to kind of watch me type that out, but we'll do some other things here. So I have a message here, and it says, I want to generate a list of links for the author. Include the author's name as the key and any social network links, as the object. So I'm being very specific here. So let's call this author's social links. Okay. So we have this specific message, and what I want to do from there is kind of tell the LLM how we're going to get this back. Again, we're using this format. So we saw this with the list format. But in this case, I want to say I want to get a new map output parser, right? And we'll just call this the map output parser. Let's do that one. Okay, so I have a map output parser. And then I can say, go ahead and give me the format. So the format is in a string. I'm going to say output parser.get format. Again, we did this kind of inline last time. I'm just being a little more explicit so you can see this. So now we need a prompt template. So we're going to say new prompt template. And inside the prompt template, we're going to pass in our message. So we need our prompt message, and then our map to kind of fill everything in. So we're going to say map.of, and we're replacing the author with whatever we got back from, or whatever we received as an argument to this method, which is using the path variable. So I'll just say author, and then I'm going to say the format is the format, right? So now we have our prompt template. I should create a variable there. So prompt template, yes. Now what I need to do is say prompt template. Oops, prompt. Now I need to say prompt template.create. We'll get a variable back from that called prompt. Finally, generation is equal to our chat client.call. We'll pass in our prompt. Again, these are things that we've kind of done before. We get the result, and then what I want to return is the output parser. I want to use the parse method there, and then I'm just going to use the generation dot get output dot get content. So again, the content is what we are getting back from the LLM. That is in the form of a string or maybe even a JSON string. But the output parser is going to handle parsing that string into whatever we want. In this case, a map of string and object. So let's see if we can go ahead and run this, see if this works. So far, so good. Again, we're going to go to /books/author and then an author's name. All right, so I'm going to go over to the terminal. We'll clear this out. http://8080. So we're going to go to /author/ and I'm going to type in one of my favorite authors, the great Craig Walls. So let's say %20 Walls. And let's see if we can get this. Okay, so 404 not found because we are supposed to go to books. So let's try that. Looks like it's thinking, making the call to the LLM, parsing the response, and here we go. So Craig Walls is the key. The object is going to include some links for social media. So here's his GitHub, LinkedIn, and Twitter. And I know Habuma is that indeed his handle. So that looks good. Again, just another way to kind of handle the output response. For the final demo of this, we want to turn this into a bean using the bean output parser. What is a bean? A bean is just a simple POJO, a simple record. In this case, we're going to use a record to declare a type. We're going to declare an author type. So let's go ahead and create a new Git mapping, and we'll just call this by author. I'm going to say that at the end of the day, I want to return something called an author. So I want to get books by author. We're going to have a request body, request param, and we'll call this value the author. And we'll have a default value of, let's switch this up. I'll go to my other favorite author, Ken Cousin, and we'll assign this to a string called author. So the first thing we're going to do is talk about the prompt that we're going to send to the LLM. In this case, I want to generate a list of books written by the author. If you aren't positive that a book belongs to this author, please don't include it, because if you don't do that, I get a lot of like really random books coming back for this. And here's the format. So we know about formats, right? We've been talking about them. There's a new output parser that we can talk about called the bean output parser. And if you look at the bean output parser, there is one that takes a class T, and then an object mapper. In this case, I'm just going to pass the class in. So I don't actually have a class yet. So I'm going to call this author.class. Nope. And then we'll go ahead and return an output parser. So let's say output parser. So we need to create this class, this author class. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new record. I'm going to call this author. And this is just going to have a couple of different properties in it. As far as the record goes, I want a string to represent the author's name, and I want a list of strings to represent the author's books. And that's all there is. But at least I have a type now that I'm working with. I want to take the response and turning it into this type where I have an author and a list of books for this particular author, right? So let's fix this real quick. And this is the beauty. We don't even have to do this. We can just say var output parser equals new bean output parser. And this is the class that I want to turn it into. So again, I can say string format is equal to output parser.get format. So now I have a format. Now what I can do, we've seen this before, but I can say new prompt template. I got to pass in my message. So here's my message. I got to pass in my map to replace these values. So I'm going to say map.of. We're going to say author is equal to author. Format is equal to format, right? We'll get a variable from that, which is prompt template. And let me close this because we've zoomed in a little. Again, we've been doing this now, prompt template.create. So this should start to get pretty familiar. We have a prompt. We can say chat client.call. And what I'm going to pass in is my prompt. And all we're going to do is get the result from that. And that will return to us a generation. And now what we can do is return the output parsers parse method. So I'm going to say parse. And then what I want to parse is the output and the content. That is what's coming back from the LLM. So now in this case, we have no red squigglies. It realizes that it is indeed going to return an author. What am I getting here? Yeah, duplicates. That's okay. Yeah, this is just a demo, but yeah, I would probably split that out. Okay, so let's go ahead and rerun our example here. No errors, that's good. Again, we want to go to /books/by-author, and then I have a default value of Ken Cousin for my author. So let's say /books/by-author, and it is thinking, making its call to the LLM, getting it back, and hopefully parsing it into an object that we can work with. So here's our object. We have an author object now that has the author key, Ken Cousin, and then here are the books: Making Java Groovy, Gradle Recipes for Android, Modern Java Recipes, which I have, Groovy Fundamentals, Help Your Boss, the Kotlin Cookbook, and Gradle for Android. Awesome. This is good. Now we get a response back, and it's not just some random string. We're actually turning it into an object that we can work with. For this purpose, it doesn't really matter, but like imagine in a real world scenario where you make this call, and now I need an author object that I have to work with across my application. This makes it really easy. Well, that was a lot of fun. As I said at the beginning, this is one of the problems that you're gonna have to solve for. Instead of just getting a string back, you need a way to parse that output into something useful that we can go ahead and work with in our applications. Thankfully, Spring AI has an output parser interface with 3 really good implementations so far: the map, the list, and the bean output parser, all 3 of which we demoed today. And as I said throughout the tutorial, if you want to find the code for this, that will be in the description below. So, friends, I hope you learned something new today. I've been having fun with Spring AI. We have a lot more videos coming, a lot more cool demos that we're going to work with, but I'd love to hear from you. Are you finding these useful? What would you like to learn? I know RAG is really big on the list, stuffing the prompt. We're going to get into all those. But yeah, I've been having a lot of fun with this, and I hope you are too. With that, if you found some value in this video, please do me a favor, friends. Give me a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and as always, happy coding.